My son, my only child, the boy who was the entire world to me, called me tonight. He said, "Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow. Your car and your house are sold. Bye." And then he hung up. Hi everyone. For those who are new here, I'm Grandma Carol. My name is Carol Jennings. I'm 74 years old, and I'm speaking to you tonight from the guest room of my dear friend Martha's house. As of about an hour ago, I don't have a home of my own. This isn't a story that I've kept hidden for years. This isn't a memory I've had to dredge up from the past. This story is happening to me right now. My hands are still shaking. My heart feels like a frantic bird trapped in my chest. I called Martha, my friend of 50 years, and I couldn't even form the words. I think I was just sobbing into the phone, and she just said, "Carol, I'm coming to get you." I grabbed my purse, my medication, and the photo album that sits on my nightstand. And I walked out of the house I've lived in for 45 years, leaving everything else behind. I don't even know if I had the right to be there anymore. My own son told me it was sold. I'm sharing this now, in this raw, terrifying moment, because I don't know what else to do. I feel like if I don't say it out loud, to someone, my heart will actually explode. The shame. Gosh, the humiliation that my own child could do this to me. It's a poison, and I can feel it spreading through my veins. He didn't just take my house. He took my life. He took my past. He took the very meaning of my existence. Before I even try to make sense of this waking nightmare, I need to ask for your help. A small favor. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Right now, your support isn't just a nice thing to have. It feels like the only thing holding me together. Every click, every subscription, is a quiet voice telling me that I still exist, that I haven't been completely erased. It gives me the strength to even begin to tell you how this could have possibly happened. Thank you. To understand the monster who made that phone call, you have to first understand the beautiful, loving boy I raised. My story, the one that ends with me sitting here in a borrowed nightgown, begins with a love so fierce and all-consuming that it became the son my entire world revolved around. It began the day my son, Michael, was born. It all started, really, after my husband, my dear Robert, passed away. Robert was a good man, a strong man, a firefighter who ran into burning buildings to save others. And one day a building fell, and he didn't come home. Michael was only 10 years old. One moment, he had a father, a hero. The next, he was the man of the house, a little boy with shoulders too small to carry such a heavy burden. I looked at my son, at his wide, terrified eyes, and I made a vow in that moment. I vowed I would be everything for him. I would be his mother and his father. I would be his shield, his rock, his soft place to land. I would make sure he never felt the full crushing weight of his father's absence. My life, from that day forward, was no longer my own. It was his. And he was the most wonderful son a mother could ask for. He was my shadow, my little helper. When I cried in those first lonely months, he would wrap his small arms around my neck and whisper, "It's okay, Mommy. I'll take care of you." We were a team. It was Carol and Michael against the world. I poured every ounce of my being into him. I worked 2 jobs, as a secretary at the local school during the day and cleaning offices at night, just to make sure he had everything the other kids had. I wanted to make sure he never felt less than because he didn't have a father. I saved every penny. I bought him his first baseball glove, his first bicycle. I remember standing in the street, my back aching, holding on to the seat of that bike, running behind him until he finally found his balance and pedaled away, his triumphant laughter echoing back to me. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. Every sacrifice was worth it for moments like that. When it came time for him to go to college, there was no question that he would go to the best school he got into. We didn't have the money. Not really, but I didn't hesitate. I went to the bank. The house, our small, modest home that Robert and I had bought together, was almost paid off. I took out a new mortgage, a home equity loan, to pay for his tuition, I didn't think twice. My home was just a pile of bricks and wood. His future was everything. He was so grateful. He would call me from his dorm room, his voice full of excitement about his classes. "I couldn't do this without you, Mom," he'd say. "One day, I'm going to pay you back for all of this. I'm going to buy you a big, beautiful house, and you'll never have to work again." I'd just laugh and tell him his happiness was the only payment I ever needed. After Robert died, all the legal and financial matters were overwhelming. I was never good with that sort of thing. Robert had always handled it. Michael, who was studying business in college, stepped in to help. He was so smart, so capable. "Mom, this is all too complicated for you to deal with," he said one summer when he was home from school, looking at the pile of paperwork on the kitchen table. "Let me help you. We should put my name on the house deed, just in case something ever happens to you. It will make things simpler down the line. And we should set up a power of attorney, so I can handle the bills and talk to the bank for you. You've done so much. Let me take this burden off your shoulders." It felt like the ultimate act of love. My son, my responsible, brilliant son, was taking care of his old mother. I signed the papers he put in front of me without even reading them fully. My heart swelled with pride and love. I had raised such a good man. I had given him my trust. I had given him my home. I had given him my future. The change began about 3 years ago. It was gradual, a slow cooling I tried to ignore. It started when he met her. Her name is Tiffany. He met her at the high-powered consulting firm, where he got a job right out of college. He was so excited when he first told me about her. "She's amazing, Mom," he'd gushed over the phone. "She's so smart, so beautiful, so driven." I was thrilled for him. I had waited my whole life for him to find someone to make him happy. The first time I met her, she was perfectly polite. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and complimented my home, calling it. She was beautiful, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. But there was a coolness in her eyes, a way she looked around my simple, comfortable living room, as if it were a strange exhibit in a museum. She held my son's hand, but her grip seemed proprietary, like she owned him. After Tiffany, the phone calls became less frequent. The visits grew shorter. When they did visit, Michael seemed different. He was quieter, more reserved. He and Tiffany would speak in a kind of code, talking about stock options and mergers and people I didn't know. I felt like a foreigner in my own life's conversation. They would often be on their phones, their faces illuminated by the blue glow, their thumbs flying. The easy, comfortable silence we once shared was gone, replaced by a tense, electric quiet. I told myself I was being a silly, jealous mother. This was natural. He was building his own life. I had to let him go. So I tried harder. I would cook his favorite meals when they visited. I would ask Tiffany about her work, trying to show interest in her life. Her answers were always short, vague, and delivered with a tight, dismissive smile. She made me feel simple, unimportant. The last time I saw him was 3 months ago. They came for a Sunday lunch. It was strained and awful. Michael spent most of the time in the driveway on a conference call. Tiffany sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, sighing with a kind of bored impatience. When Michael finally came inside, he looked stressed and angry. "We have to go," he said, not even looking at me. "We have an early start tomorrow." I walked them to the door. I hugged my son, but he felt stiff and distant in my arms. "I love you, honey," I said. "You too, Mom," he said, already halfway out the door. Tiffany just gave me a small, tight wave. And that was it. 3 months of silence. I called. I left messages. "Hi, sweetie. Just your old mom calling to say hi. Hope you're okay. I love you." He never called back. I told myself he was busy. I told myself his job was demanding. I made 1,000 excuses for him because the truth was too painful to even contemplate. The truth, I now know, is that he was busy selling my house. He was busy selling my car. He was busy liquidating my life. And I, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, was the last person he thought he needed to inform. I was just a loose end to be tied up. A final, inconvenient phone call to make before he started his new, perfect life with his new, perfect wife. A life built on the foundations of the home he had just stolen from his own mother. The silence that followed the click of the phone was the loudest, most violent sound I have ever heard. It was a physical presence in the room, a deafening roar that ripped through the quiet fabric of my life. I stood in the hallway of my home. Was it still my home? With the cordless phone still pressed to my ear, my knuckles white. My brain simply could not process the words. It was like trying to read a sentence in a foreign language. I'm getting married tomorrow. Oh, and even. Your car and your house are sold. Yes. Kai. The phrases echoed in the cavern of my mind, nonsensical and absurd. It had to be a joke. A cruel, terrible, vicious joke. Michael had a strange sense of humor sometimes. This was just a prank. In a minute, he would call back, laughing, and say, "Gotcha, Mom," and everything would go back to normal. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, staring at the family photos on the hallway wall. There was Michael at his 5th birthday party, his face smeared with chocolate cake. There he was at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulder, both of us beaming with pride. There he was on the day I dropped him off at college, trying to look brave as I drove away. A lifetime of love, a lifetime of sacrifice, all captured in these small silver frames. And the boy in those photos, the boy whose entire existence had been the center of my own, could not be the same person who had just spoken those words. It wasn't possible. My legs gave out. I didn't fall, but I sort of slid down the wall, my back scraping against the floral wallpaper, until I was sitting in a heap on the floor. The phone clattered from my numb fingers. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. A cold, creeping numbness was spreading through me, a terrifying physical sensation, as if my very blood were turning to ice. My inner monologue was a frantic, desperate scramble for an explanation. There has to be a mistake. He's been hacked. Someone stole his phone. He's in some kind of trouble, and he's being forced to say these things. Tiffany put him up to this. She's controlling him. She's the one who did this. I cycled through every possible scenario, each more outlandish than the last, because any explanation, no matter how crazy, was better than the simple, brutal truth. My son had done this to me. I crawled on my hands and knees over to where the phone had fallen. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to pick it up. I pressed the redial button. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. His voice, his cheerful, professional voicemail greeting, was a fresh stab to my heart. "Hi, you've reached Michael Jennings. I can't take your call right now." I hung up, and I knew. The final, fragile layer of denial shattered. This was real. This was happening. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor. Time had lost all meaning. The shadows in the hallway grew longer as the sun began to set. The familiar, comforting sounds of my house, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, now sounded ominous, like the sounds of a house that was no longer mine. Every object I looked at was a ghost. The worn spot on the carpet where Robert used to sit and watch TV, the faint pencil marks on the doorframe, where I had measured Michael's height every year. This wasn't just a house. It was the repository of my entire life. And he had sold it. He had sold my memories. He had sold my sanctuary. He had sold my future. A new thought, sharp and terrifying, pierced through the fog of my shock. Where will I go? What will I do? I was 74 years old. I lived on my small widow's pension and Social Security. I had no savings to speak of. Every spare penny had gone to Michael, to his education, to his life. The house was my only asset, my only security. Without it, I was destitute. Utterly and completely destitute. The image of myself on the street, a homeless old woman with a shopping cart, flashed in my mind. It was so vivid, so horribly plausible, that a wave of pure, animalistic panic washed over me. That was when I called Martha. My fingers fumbled with the numbers, my vision blurred by tears. I didn't even realize I was crying. The moment I heard her kind, familiar voice say, "Hello?" A sound ripped from my throat, a raw, ragged sob of such despair that it barely sounded human. I couldn't speak. I couldn't form words. There was only this terrible, jagged river of pain pouring out of me. And Martha, my friend for half a century, she didn't ask questions. She didn't demand an explanation. She just listened to the sound of my heart breaking, and she understood. "Carol," she said, her voice a lifeline in the darkness. "I'm coming to get you. I'm on my way. Don't move. Just wait for me." Her words galvanized me. They gave me a task. Wait for Martha. I struggled to my feet, using the wall for support. My body felt ancient, frail, as if I had aged 50 years in the last hour. I looked around the hallway, at the life I was about to leave. What could I take? What was even mine to take? My eyes landed on the photo album on the nightstand in my bedroom, its worn leather cover a familiar comfort. It was the album of Michael's childhood. I stumbled into the bedroom and grabbed it. My gaze fell on my purse, sitting on the dresser. My wallet. My medication. I stuffed them inside. My car keys were on a small dish. "Your car is sold." The words echoed in my head. The keys were useless. They were just pieces of metal that no longer meant anything. I walked out of my bedroom, past the living room where I had taught Michael to read, past the kitchen where I had baked his birthday cakes every year, past the front door that I had painted a cheerful yellow just last summer. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't have the right. It wasn't my door anymore. The evening air was cool on my hot cheeks. I sat down on the top step of the porch, the same step where Michael had sat, crying, after he'd scraped his knee as a little boy. I clutched my purse and the photo album to my chest, and I waited. I was a refugee in my own life, waiting for a rescue boat to appear in the twilight. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, up the quiet suburban street that had been my home for my entire adult life. And I had never, ever felt so alone. Martha's car pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the growing darkness like a pair of kind, searching eyes. I watched her get out, her face a mask of worry, and for a moment I couldn't move. My feet felt nailed to the porch. The shame was a physical weight, a heavy cloak that made me want to shrink into the shadows and disappear. I was an old woman who had just been thrown out of her own life by her own son. How do you explain that to someone? How do you even begin? She didn't force me to. She walked up the path, her steps quick and determined, and when she reached me, she simply wrapped her arms around my trembling shoulders. She didn't say, "What happened?" or "What's wrong?" She just said, "Oh, Carol," and her voice was so full of a lifetime of shared friendship, of love, that the dam inside me broke for the second time. I buried my face in her shoulder and sobbed, clinging to her like a child lost in a department store. Hey, I tried to say, but the words wouldn't come. They were jagged pieces of glass in my throat. "Shh, it's all right," she whispered, stroking my hair. "You don't have to talk. Not now. Let's just get you home. Let's get you to my house." She guided me down the steps, my legs unsteady. I didn't look back at the house. I couldn't bear to see its familiar, welcoming porch lights, knowing they were no longer welcoming me. Getting into her car felt like stepping into a lifeboat, leaving a sinking ship behind. The drive to her house, which was only 10 minutes away, was a blur. I stared out the window, my mind a blank white canvas of shock. Martha didn't press me for details. She just kept up a soft, soothing monologue, talking about her garden, about a funny thing her cat did that morning, about anything and nothing. She was filling the terrifying silence, giving my shattered mind something to cling to other than the jagged edges of my own pain. When we arrived at her home, she led me inside as if I were a fragile piece of glass. Her house was so familiar, a place I had visited 1,000 times for coffee, for bridge games, for holiday dinners. But tonight, it felt different. It was a sanctuary, an embassy in a foreign land. She settled me into her guest room, a lovely little room with floral wallpaper and a big, comfortable-looking quilt on the bed. "Here," she said, handing me one of her own soft flannel nightgowns. "You get changed and get into bed. I'm going to make you a cup of chamomile tea." I did as I was told, my movements slow and robotic. I changed into her nightgown, which smelled faintly of her familiar, comforting laundry detergent. I sat on the edge of the bed, the photo album clutched in my lap. I was 74 years old, and I was having a sleepover at my friend's house because I had nowhere else in the world to go. The sheer, pathetic absurdity of it was a fresh wave of humiliation. Martha returned with the tea, her face full of a gentle, aching sympathy. She sat in the armchair across from me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She just let me be. She let the silence be a companion, not an enemy. Finally, she asked, her voice soft as a whisper. "Carol, honey, can you tell me what happened? Was it a fire? A gas leak?" She was searching for a rational explanation, a disaster that could be understood and dealt with. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on the floral pattern of the quilt. I opened my mouth to speak, and the words finally came out, quiet and dead, like stones dropping into a well. "Michael called me," I said. "He told me he's getting married tomorrow. He told me he sold the house. He sold the car." And then he hung up. I watched her face as she processed the words. I saw the confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror. She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. "What?" she finally breathed. "What do you mean? He sold the house. How could he sell the house? It's your house." And then I had to tell her the next part of the story, the part that made me not just a victim, but a fool. I put his name on the deed, Martha," I whispered, the shame so thick I could barely speak. "Years ago, after Robert died, he said it would be simpler in case something happened to me, and the power of attorney, I gave him that too. He said it was to help me with the bills. I signed the papers. I trusted him. I trusted him." I saw the understanding and the pity flood her eye. Oh, that pity was like a knife. She didn't say, "How could you be so stupid?" But she didn't have to. I was screaming it at myself on the inside. How could you be so blind? How could you be so naive? "That boy," she finally said, her voice a low, furious hiss. "That conniving, ungrateful boy." Her anger on my behalf was a strange comfort. It was the first emotion other than my own pain that I had felt all evening. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in that strange, comfortable bed, my eyes wide open in the darkness, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. My mind was a racetrack, with the same thoughts circling over and over and over again. He sold my house. My son sold my house. How could he? Why would he? Tiffany. It must be Tiffany. She's a viper. She poisoned him against me. But he let himself be poisoned. He held the pen. He signed the papers. He made the call. My son did this. My little boy. The boy I raised. The boy I sacrificed everything for. He did this. Gee. I would drift into a state of semi-consciousness, only to be jolted awake by the raw panic of my situation. I am homeless. I have no money. I have nothing. The fear was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I felt a recurring, desperate urge to call him, to scream at him, to beg him, to ask him quietly. But I knew he wouldn't answer. And what would I even say? He had made his position brutally clear. He had ended the conversation with a single devastating word. Bye-bye. The next morning, I was a wreck. My eyes were swollen shut from crying. My hands trembled so much I couldn't hold a coffee cup. Martha treated me like an invalid, making me toast, hovering around me, her kindness both a comfort and a source of profound shame. "We need to do something, Carol," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "We can't just let him get away with this. This is illegal. This is theft." But it's not, I whispered, the horrible truth dawning on me. I signed the papers. I gave him the power. In the eyes of the law, I did this to myself. The realization was a fresh wave of nausea. There are lawyers for this kind of thing, she insisted. Elder abuse, financial exploitation. A son can't just throw his mother out on the street. But I couldn't even begin to think about lawyers. My mind was still stuck on a more fundamental, more painful point. Today was his wedding day. Right now, as I sat here in a borrowed robe, a 74-year-old refugee, my son was putting on a tuxedo. He was preparing to stand in front of his friends and family and pledge his life to a woman. And he had prepared for this happy day by utterly destroying the life of his own mother. The cruelty, the sheer, psychopathic coldness of the timing was something I couldn't wrap my head around. I spent the day in a stupor. Martha tried to distract me. She put on a movie. She brought me a book. But I couldn't focus. I was a ghost at my son's wedding. I pictured the scene, the flowers, the music, Tiffany in a beautiful white dress, my son smiling, happy, his face full of love for his new bride. And not once, I was sure, would a thought of his mother, the mother he had made homeless just hours before, cross his mind. Late that afternoon, something inside me shifted. The frantic, cyclical panic began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard, terrifying resolve. I had to know. I had to see the truth for myself. "Martha," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm in the quiet room. "I need you to do me a favor. I need you to drive me over to my house." She looked at me, her eyes full of alarm. "Carol, no. What's the point? It will only hurt you more." "I have to," I said, a new steely determination in my voice. "I won't go in. I need to see it. I need to see if it's real." She argued, but she saw the look on my face. She knew it was no use. Reluctantly, she agreed. As we drove down my street, my heart was a slow, heavy drum. And then I saw it. There, hammered into my front lawn, the lawn my Robert had so lovingly tended for 30 years, was a bright red and white sign. On it, in big, bold letters, was a single, devastating word. Soldidi. It was real. It was all real. And standing there on the porch, directing two men who were carrying out my dining room chairs, was Tiffany. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a clipboard in her hand. She looked triumphant. She looked like the queen of a newly conquered castle. And as I watched, my son Michael walked out of the house. He was smiling. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind and kissed her neck. They looked so happy. So blissfully, cruelly happy. And in that moment, watching them, the last vestiges of my hope, my love, my memory of the boy I had raised, died. The grief was replaced by something new. Something cold. Something hard. Something that would become the foundation of the woman I had to become, if I was going to survive. Seeing them like that, so happy, so carefree, amidst the ruins of my life, did something to me that the phone call alone had not. The shock that had encased my heart in ice began to crack, and through the fissures seeped a hot, unfamiliar rage. It wasn't the loud, screaming rage I would have expected. It was a quiet, deep, and terrifyingly cold fury. It was the anger of a mother animal, whose cub has been not just taken, but murdered by one of its own. Martha saw the look on my face. "Let's go, Carol," she said, her voice gentle but firm, putting a hand on my arm. "There's nothing for you here." She was right. I let her drive me away, but I didn't look back this time. I kept my eyes fixed forward. The image of Michael and Tiffany, laughing on my porch, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. That image would become my fuel. The next few days were a strange limbo. I existed in Martha's guest room, a ship in a quiet harbor after a hurricane. The raw, screaming panic had subsided, replaced by a vast, hollow emptiness. I ate what Martha put in front of me. I slept when exhaustion finally claimed me, but I wasn't really there. I was adrift. The recurring hurtful details of my new reality were a constant torture. Waking up in an unfamiliar bed, reaching for my favorite coffee mug and realizing it was gone, probably sold for $1 at an estate sale. The sheer, crushing humiliation of having to borrow money from Martha for a toothbrush and some soap. Every tiny moment was a reminder of my new status. I was a charity case. A 74-year-old woman with no home, no car, no money, and no family. My son had not just stolen my assets. He had stolen my identity. I was no longer Carol Jennings, homeowner, mother, grandmother in waiting. I was just a burden, an occupant in a friend's spare room. My inner monologue was a bleak, desolate landscape. How could he do this? The question had lost its frantic, searching quality. It was now a flat, dead statement of fact. He did this. The why of it was still a mystery, a black hole of cruelty that I couldn't comprehend. Was it just the money? Was he in some kind of trouble? Or was he simply, purely, a monster? And if he was a monster, what did that make me, the woman who had created him, who had loved him, who had failed so spectacularly to see what was growing in his heart? The most cutting dialogues were the ones I had with myself. I would look at the photo album I had saved, at the pictures of that smiling, bright-eyed little boy, and I would feel a fresh wave of nausea. Was that boy a lie? Was the love I felt from him my entire life just a performance? A long 40-year act designed to get him what he wanted in the end. The thought was so vile, so corrosive, that it made me feel physically ill. The sentence rhythm of my thoughts was short, sharp, and brutal. He's married. The house is gone. The money is gone. I have nothing. It was a litany of loss that I repeated to myself in the dead of night. It was about a week after the phone call that the final blow landed. The one that finally, irrevocably, killed the last shred of the woman I used to be and cleared the way for the woman I had to become. Martha came into the guest room one morning, her face grim. She was holding a large, white, official-looking envelope. "Carol," she said softly, "this came for you. It was forwarded from your old address." My heart seized. I knew with a sickening certainty what it was. My hands trembled as I took it from her. It was from a law firm, a name I didn't recognize. I tore it open. Inside was a stack of legal documents. It was a formal notification. A divorce petition, from Michael's father, Robert R.T. What? That made no sense. Robert was dead. He'd been dead for 34 years. I read the first page, my mind struggling to make sense of the dense legal jargon. And then I saw it. The petitioner's name was not my deceased husband. The petitioner's name was Michael, my son, and the respondent's name was not mine. It was a woman I had never heard of. Tiffany, gay. My son was not getting married. He, Wes, married. And he was now getting a divorce. The documents laid out the cold, brutal facts. Michael and Tiffany were dissolving their marriage. And according to the petition, as part of their settlement, all jointly held assets were to be liquidated immediately. The petition listed the assets: the house on Elm Street, a 2022 sedan Dato, and a joint investment portfolio. My house, my car, my money. My mind, which had been foggy with grief, suddenly became sharp as a shard of glass. It all clicked into place, a series of horrifying logical steps. He had put his name on my deed. He had gained power of attorney. Then, at some point, he had gotten married to Tiffany, a fact he had conveniently never mentioned to me. And then, he had retitled all of my assets, the house, the car, the savings I had entrusted to him, as joint marital property. And now, in their divorce, their joint property was being sold off. He wasn't just getting married. He was using a sham divorce as a legal mechanism to launder my entire life, to liquidate everything, turn it into cash, and split it with his soon-to-be ex-wife, cutting me out completely and legally. By the time it was done, the house, the car, the money, it would all be gone, washed clean through a corrupt legal process, and I would have no claim to any of it. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy. A brilliant, meticulously planned, and utterly evil financial crime. And the final, most devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place. The phone call. "I'm getting married tomorrow." It was a lie. A deliberate, calculated lie designed to confuse me, to throw me off the scent. He knew the legal notices would be coming. He wanted me to be looking for a marriage certificate, not a divorce petition. He was covering his tracks. I let the papers fall from my lap onto the floor. I looked up at Martha, who was watching me with wide, terrified eyes. A sound came out of my throat. It wasn't a sob. It wasn't a scream. It was a laugh. A low, cold, hollow sound that I didn't recognize as my own. He hadn't just thrown me out. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had used the law itself as his weapon. He had used the sacred vows of marriage and the cold mechanics of divorce as the tools to orchestrate my ruin. He had planned this for years. Every loving word, every act of helping me had been a step in this long, monstrous con. He had not only betrayed me as a son, he had violated me as a financial partner, using my own trust as the key to unlock and drain my life. In that moment, something inside me broke for the last time. The grief, the shock, the sadness, the love I still foolishly harbored for the boy in the photographs, it all burned away, and what was left was not a void. It was a core of something hard and cold and dangerous. It was the calm, quiet, absolute certainty of a woman who had been pushed past the breaking point and had found something terrifying on the other side. He thought he was smart. He thought he had committed the perfect crime. He thought his mother was a weak, stupid, sentimental old fool who would just curl up and die. He had no idea who I was. He had no idea what my Robert, his father the firefighter, had taught me about running into a burning building when everyone else is running out. My life was that burning building, and I was about to run right back in. The hollow laugh that escaped my lips in Martha's guest room was the sound of a death rattle. It was the death of Carol Jennings, the gentle, trusting, heartbroken mother. The woman who had just been born in her place was someone I didn't recognize, but someone I knew, with a terrifying certainty, I would need to become in order to survive. The fog of grief and shock was gone, burned away by the cold, white-hot fury of understanding. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It calcified. It hardened into a diamond-sharp point of purpose. For my entire life, I had been the heart of the family, as Richard used to say about my first husband. I was the soft place to land, the keeper of memories, the maker of birthday cakes. Michael had counted on that. He had built his entire monstrous plan around the assumption that I was weak, emotional, and ignorant. He had mistaken my kindness for stupidity. He was about to find out that a mother's love, when betrayed so profoundly, doesn't just die. It can transform into something far more dangerous. It can transform into a weapon. I looked at the divorce petition lying on the floor. To Michael, it was the final nail in my coffin. To me, it was now a roadmap. It was the first piece of evidence. He thought he had committed the perfect crime, but he had made one fatal mistake. He had sent me the instruction manual. My fight back didn't begin with screams or tears. It began with a silence so profound, so absolute, that it unnerved even Martha. I stood up from the bed, picked up the legal documents, and folded them neatly. The trembling in my hands was gone. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of pain, was now a quiet, cold, orderly room. I began to think, not like a mother, not like a victim. I began to think like a strategist. "Martha," I said, and my voice was so calm, so steady, it startled us both. "I need to use your computer, and I need a notebook and a pen." For the next 2 days, I did not leave that guest room. I turned it into my war room. Martha would bring me coffee and toast, her eyes full of worried questions, but she saw the new, hard light in my eyes, and she didn't press. She just supported me. She was my silent, loyal quartermaster. My first act was to become an expert. I had given Michael power of attorney. I had signed the deed. I had done it out of love and trust. Now, I had to understand what I had actually signed. I spent hours online, my old, tired eyes scanning page after page of legal websites. I typed in phrases like durable power of attorney abuse, fraudulent conveyance of property, divorce settlement involving third-party assets. I learned about fiduciary duty, the sacred legal obligation a person with power of attorney has to act only in the best interest of the person they represent. A duty Michael had not just violated, but had gleefully tap-danced upon. I learned that what he had done, transferring my sole assets into his and his wife's joint marital property for the express purpose of liquidating them in a divorce, had a name. It was a classic, textbook example of financial elder abuse and fraud. It was a crime. A serious crime. My second act was to gather my own intelligence. He thought I was a sentimental old fool who only cared about photo albums. He was wrong. My Robert, the firefighter, had been a meticulous man. He had taught me to be the same. After he died, I had become the keeper of our history. Somewhere, I knew I had everything. "Martha," I said on the second day, "I need to go to my storage unit." The storage unit was a sad, lonely place, a 10 by 10-foot box filled with the furniture Sarah and David, from our previous story, would have labeled with red stickers. But amongst the clutter was my old filing cabinet, the one Robert and I had used for 40 years. It was locked, but I still had the key on my old keychain in my purse. I spent 3 hours in that cold, concrete hallway, sitting on the floor, going through every single file. And I found it all. The original deed to my house, with only Robert's and my names on it. The bank statements showing I had paid the mortgage, on my own, for 34 years after Robert died. The paperwork for the home equity loan I had taken out to pay for Michael's best school. And most importantly, I found my copy of the durable power of attorney document I had so naively signed. I sat there on that dusty floor, and I read the fine print, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. Because my son, in his arrogant brilliance, had also made a mistake. The document he had downloaded from the internet and had me sign was a standard, generic form, and it contained a standard, generic clause. A clause that stated the agent, Michael, was explicitly prohibited from making gifts of the principal's property to himself or to a third party. By retitling my house and my assets into his and Tiffany's joint names, he hadn't just been unethical. He had explicitly violated the terms of the very document that gave him his power. He had gifted my entire life to himself and his wife. He had handed me the gun and the bullet to shoot down his entire scheme. My third and final act of preparation was to find my own weapon. I didn't need just a lawyer. I needed a warrior. I went back to Martha's house, and I got back on the computer. I didn't search for divorce lawyers. I searched for financial fraud attorneys. I searched for prosecutors who specialize in elder abuse. I was looking for the toughest, most feared, most relentless lawyer in the state. I found her. Her name was Victoria Stone, and her reputation preceded her. Her website was filled with testimonials from people she had saved and quiet newspaper clippings about corrupt businessmen she had destroyed. Her picture showed a woman in her 50s with eyes like chips of granite and a jawline that looked like it could cut glass. She was exactly what I needed. I called her office. I expected to get a paralegal, an assistant. But when I told the receptionist my story in a few clear, concise sentences, my son used a power of attorney to transfer all my assets to himself and is now liquidating them in a fraudulent divorce, I was put on hold. A minute later, a new voice came on the line. A voice that was crisp, clear, and radiated an almost palpable authority. "This is Victoria Stone," she said. "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her the whole story, from the day Robert died to the phone call to the divorce papers. I told her about the documents I had found in my storage unit. I spoke with the cold, hard clarity I had found in the depths of my despair. I wasn't a crying, hysterical victim. I was a client with a case. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she was going to turn me down. Then, I heard her take a deep breath. And when she spoke, her voice was low, and it was vibrating with a controlled righteous fury that sent a thrill down my spine. "Mrs. Jennings," she said, "what your son has done is not just a civil matter. It is a federal crime. He is engaged in wire fraud, mail fraud, and a conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. This is not a divorce case. This is a prosecution." She continued, "We are going to do two things. First, we are going to file an emergency injunction to halt the divorce proceedings and freeze every single asset he has touched. We will file it tomorrow morning. Second, I am going to make a phone call to a friend of mine in the U.S. Attorney's office. Your son thought he was clever. He is about to find out what happens when the full weight of the United States justice system lands on his head." After I hung up the phone, I sat there in the quiet guest room, and I felt a sense of peace so profound. It was almost holy. I had been forged in the fire of betrayal, and I had come out the other side, no longer made of soft clay, but of tempered steel. Michael thought he was getting married. He thought he was getting divorced. He thought he was starting a new life built on the ashes of mine. He had no idea what was coming for him. He had no idea that his sentimental, foolish old mother had just declared war. And it was a war he was going to lose in the most spectacular, public, and devastating way imaginable. The consequences of that phone call to Victoria Stone were not immediate, but they were catastrophic, like a tidal wave building silently offshore. My son, my brilliant, arrogant Michael, had no idea it was coming. He was busy with his sham divorce, eagerly awaiting the moment he could cash out my life and split it with his co-conspirator, Tiffany. The first he knew that his perfect plan had gone horribly wrong was a week later. I wasn't there, but my lawyer, Ms. Stone, painted a very vivid picture for me afterwards. He was in a deposition for the divorce, sitting across a polished table from Tiffany and her lawyer. They were calmly, smugly, dividing up the spoils of their crime. My house, my car, my savings. In the middle of the deposition, the door to the conference room opened. Two men walked in. They were dressed in dark suits and had the quiet, grim authority of federal agents. Which, of course, they were. They walked directly to the table. One of them addressed my son. "Michael Jennings?" Michael looked up, his expression one of pure, annoyed confusion. "Yes, we're in the middle of something here." The agent didn't smile. He placed a document on the table in front of Michael. It was a federal warrant. "Michael Jennings, you are under arrest for suspicion of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse." Ms. Stone told me the color drained from his face. He looked at Tiffany, his eyes wide with panic, but she was already backing away from him, her own face a mask of horror, as she realized their clever little scheme had just exploded. He looked at his lawyer, who was staring at the warrant, his mouth agape. There was no one to help him. They put him in handcuffs, right there in the middle of his own divorce deposition. They led him out of the building, a perp walk in his expensive suit. The master of the universe was being frog-marched out of his high-rise office building like a common criminal. The ultimate humiliation for a man so obsessed with status and appearances. The legal fallout was absolute. The emergency injunction froze everything. The sale of my house was halted. The divorce was suspended. Every bank account with his name on it was frozen solid. The U.S. Attorney's Office, armed with the documents from my storage unit and the power of attorney he had so foolishly violated, built an ironclad case. Tiffany, seeing which way the wind was blowing, turned on him instantly to save herself. She gave a full confession, detailing their entire plan, in exchange for a lighter sentence. She admitted that their marriage had been a business arrangement, a tool to liquidate my assets. Her testimony was the final nail in his coffin. Michael lost everything. His job fired him the day of his arrest. His company couldn't afford the scandal. His friends disappeared. His reputation was annihilated. He was facing years in a federal prison. His lawyer called me, begging me to show mercy, to tell the prosecutors it was all a misunderstanding. He tried to put Michael on the phone. I refused to speak to him. Mercy. He had shown me no mercy. He had stood by my parents' graves and called me bankrupt while he was robbing me blind. My mercy was a well that had run dry, In the end, he took a plea bargain to avoid a longer sentence. He was sentenced to several years in prison. He was forced to sign over all my assets back to me, including the house and the car. The sham divorce was annulled. He was stripped of everything. He had tried to steal my past, and in doing so, he had completely forfeited his own future. And what did I do? I found a peace I never knew existed. I sold the house. The memories were too tainted. I sold the car. I didn't need it. With the money that was rightfully mine, I bought a small, beautiful condo overlooking the ocean, a place my Robert would have loved. It's filled with light and the sound of the waves. The greatest lesson I learned was about the nature of love and the nature of strength. I had loved my son with a fierce, all-consuming, and ultimately blind love. I had mistaken his dependence on me for devotion. I had mistaken his intelligence for wisdom. My love had made me weak, a willing victim in his long con. But in the end, it was that same love, when betrayed, that gave me the strength to fight back. My strength wasn't in my anger, but in my clarity. It was the strength to see the truth, no matter how ugly, and to act on it. So now, I talk to you. To any mother, any parent who has sacrificed everything for a child. Your love is a gift, but it should not be a blank check. Trust must be earned, and it must be honored. Do not ever, ever let your love for someone blind you to who they truly are. And know this: you are stronger than you think. The same heart that can love so deeply is the same heart that can find the courage to burn it all down when it has to. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to save yourself. Thank you for allowing me to share this story. It has been a difficult one to tell, but speaking the truth is the first step toward reclaiming your power. If you have been touched by my story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. Please share your own stories of resilience in the comments. We draw strength from each other. Love you all. This is Grandma Carol, and I'll see you in the next story.